Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Early. I am a senior education program leader at Fermilab. So I run a lot of student programs. Saturday morning physics is one that's pretty well known, teacher workshops, field trips, special events. And I also have the privilege of working on bringing Sage Camp to Fermilab, working with Jen Raff. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that Fermilab does. Let's see if I can pretend like I know what I'm doing and share my presentation here. So can everyone see that and see my slides, not the presenter view? Awesome. So like I said, I work at Fermilab. We're located just outside of Chicago. I'll show you where that is in just a minute. We're one of 17 Department of Energy national laboratories. We are what is known as a single program lab. So what Fermilab does specifically is high energy particle physics. We use these things called particle accelerators. Some of you might be familiar with those, to accelerate protons to near the speed of light. We take those protons, we smash them into a target, and we study what comes out of them. So for example, Jen spends her time doing research on neutrinos, which are these really tiny particles, one of the most abundant in the universe that we know very little about. We study particles like that because they could unlock the mysteries of, energy, matter, space, and time, things that we don't know, because there's a lot. I didn't get this out of high school, but there's a lot about our universe that we don't understand yet. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that's what Fermilab does. We also study something called the muon. Our muon G-2 experiment was in the news about a year ago with some very exciting results. We have a quantum science program, so things like quantum computers. We have a particle astrophysics program. So for example, I work with scientists that spend some time at the South Pole, at the South Pole Telescope, different telescopes around the world. It's a really cool place to work. As a former science teacher, this is like a dream job for me, that I get to connect you all with the work that we do, and also the broader national lab complex, because it's not something I knew existed when I was in high school. So here's where all of the different national labs are located, and this is where Fermilab is located. We're about 45 miles outside of Chicago, and the other national lab that is near us is Argonne National Lab, and they're a multi-purpose lab, so they do focus their research on a variety of areas. And then this is some pictures of the Fermilab campus. It's a gorgeous place to work. We have 6,800 acres. We also have prairie restoration programs. There's about 1,000 acres of restored prairie on site. Over here, we have our main office building, Wilson Hall. My office is actually right here on the 15th floor, right about there somewhere. It's a beautiful view. Over here, you can see our particle accelerator complex. This big ring here is one of the accelerators that was called, oh, I didn't mean to do that, called the Tevatron, that operated until about 2011. And over here is the main injector particle accelerator, and that's kind of the main workhorse of the lab at the moment. So we, like I said, take protons, accelerate them to near the speed of light, they hit a target, and they get either gone, I think if I have this right, over to our muon campus here, or our neutrino campus over there. Another super fun thing about Fermilab is we have bison. We have a herd of bison on site. They were brought to the lab by the founding director, Robert Wilson. This spring, we have 18 bison calves that have been born so far. We have a bison cam. When I'm done talking, I'll put the link to bison cam in the chat, because then you can see if you can see any of the babies. So we have a lot of people from the public come on site to drive by and see the bison. And in general, it's a beautiful campus. You can kind of see from the pictures here, it's a really pretty place to work. We have a lot of cool wildlife. So to talk a little bit more about the science that we do, I just have a short video. Let me make sure I have the computer sound. I do.
At Fermilab, we study nature at its most fundamental, drilling down to the smallest scales of matter using some of the largest and most advanced machines in the world. Accelerators, powerful microscopes, send particles barreling at near light speed into other matter, creating subatomic scraps. Detectors zoom in on those fleeting pieces, making the invisible perceptible. and sophisticated computers sweep through all of it, crushing mountains of information into gems of data. We also use our cutting-edge technology to explore the mysteries of dark matter and the quantum realm. Thousands of scientists from around the world partner with Fermilab to explore how the universe works, expanding humanity's understanding of matter, energy, space, and time. Fermilab is solving the mysteries of the universe.
That's a little bit about Fermilab. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen Raff to introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Amanda. So as Amanda said, I'm Jen Raff. I'm a particle physicist at Fermilab, which means I get to do a bunch of different kinds of things as a scientist. I build stuff, I break stuff, sometimes on purpose, sometimes accidentally. And I look for interesting physics in the data from our experiments. And I love working with students. So I'm really happy that I got the opportunity to participate in last summer's SAGE camp at Slack online in preparation for hosting our own camp at Fermilab this summer. This will be our first summer hosting a camp at Fermilab. So before I turn things over to our speaker, I just want to introduce the format of today's SAGE Live event. It's a little different than last month. So today we'll have one speaker. Her name is Lauren Byron. And during her talk, please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them either during Lauren's talk or after it. And normally then now I would give an introduction to this speaker, but she tells me she wants to introduce herself. And so I'm going to pass things directly over to Lauren.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. Give me one moment while I share my screen. Does that look reasonable to folks? You can see my slides, not the presenter view.
Looks good.
Great. All right, so today we're here to talk about communication and professional brand. And I want to introduce myself to you, but I want to do it in 3 different ways. So we're going to do a little experiment. It's going to involve some acting on my part, which is questionable, but I hope you'll kind of go with me. So I'm going to present myself in 3 different ways. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you what each of my brands kind of was, or what you recognized, right? So I'm going to ask you to spot the differences, essentially. So here we go. So hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Byron. I am a communications specialist at Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, and I've worked at the lab for almost 8 years. So what does my job entail? Well, I'm a staff writer and editor, which means I've written hundreds of different pieces of communication. So for example, articles, press releases, exhibits, fact sheets, video scripts, including the one that you just heard and saw, and even a children's book. I'm also the lab's sole social media manager. So that means I run our YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts. And I've grown the lab's followers from about 100,000 to close to 1 million. I've also worked a little bit in media relations, so helping share some of the biggest science news that the lab has. You may have heard of the muon G-2 experiment, which may have broken the standard model. So there was some news from them last year. And I also get to work on special projects and events. So things like Fermilab's 50th anniversary, or last year I presented in the Fermilab Physics Slam. My contact info is there at the bottom if you would like to reach out. So what is a brand? Well, for a business, it's what we hope people will remember about you or associate with you. And so on Fermilab social media, my goal is to maintain the Fermilab brand and to put out a certain voice. And that voice is being physics-centric, so really focused on physics, being trustworthy, so an authority that you can come to and know you're going to get good information, and also being approachable, so something that's fun and feels welcoming for everyone. Okay, so that was brand 1. I'm gonna need to do a quick costume change. It's very simple. It's just me taking off my blazer, chucking it to the side dramatically. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Byron. My pronouns are she and her, and I work at Fermilab. I'm a staff writer, and I also get to run the lab's social media and also kind of a Jill of all trades. So anything that needs to happen with communication, I get to be a part of. So this has led to some really amazing experiences. I run the social media accounts, which means I get to reach millions of people around the world. I get to help write articles that break big science news. I've gotten to go some amazing places. So for example, I went a mile underground where I got to interview machinists who are building really sensitive detectors. And last year when I performed in the Physics Slam, I hosted it as a fake awards show. A little bit more about me and my background is I'm originally from Southern California. Hello, all the Californians on the call. I did my undergrad at the University of California of Irvine. I studied journalism and history, and then I went to grad school for science journalism at Northwestern. And I've had a couple different jobs. I've been an editor of a technology magazine. I've been a freelance science writer. Before that, I was a camp counselor and a tutor, and my very first job was in glorious office work doing filing. You all have to start somewhere. And when I'm not doing science or writing, or some combo of the two, you'll often find me out in nature. I love gardening, I love hiking. I love to, well, in the before times, I love to travel. I haven't done as much of that lately, but you know, there's nothing better than going to a new place, walking around, eating a lot of food, seeing sights. I spend some of my free time crafting, so I love to make things with my hands, whether that's knitting or wood burning or, you know, whatever craft you can throw at me. But mostly I just spend a lot of time reading. I really love books. You'll find me in a library. And again, I welcome questions throughout this talk. And if you don't get to ask something here, but you want to reach out after, please do. My email is there at the bottom. All right, final costume change. One sec, this one's more complicated. That's not supposed to be there. Oh my God, I can't believe that I am so dumb and I left that stupid slide in. So, hey, I'm Lauren. I work at Fermilab. My job has a lot of writing and I get to tweet stuff. I get paid to tweet stuff. That's pretty cool. Here's me as a baby. I look cool. So yeah, I've worked at the lab for a while, and you know, I don't have much of a presentation prepared, but if you want to ask me some questions, I'll answer them. And let's talk about brand. Okay, acting. All right, so now I want to go to the chat, and let me know what impression you have of each of those three Laurens that you just met. And so I put the numbers next to each of them. So if you want to put like 1 and then kind of what attributes you saw or what impressions you had, throw it at me. Let's see what you noticed. What did you take away? What do you feel about each of those Laurens? So number 1 is maybe more organized or job focused without focusing on the personal life, very professional, boss woman. Sounds a bit more like a resume. The third one was not professional, perhaps. The first one was very professional and prepared. The second one was also professional, but more laid back, having a mix between professional and social life. The second one was very friendly. These are all great. Yeah, you've spotted them, and feel free to keep dropping them in the chat, but I'll just walk back briefly through these. So you nailed it, right? The first one is I wanted to be focused on the job. What are the qualifications? What have I achieved? It definitely came off more as like a resume, right? These are the qualifications of someone who is really focused on the career aspect and wants to make sure that you know, like, I'm a very serious person. These are the accomplishments that I've had. And you can tell that, you know, it's professional. Things are laid out nicely. There's a professional headshot. There's appropriate contact info. You can tell it's more professional and focused on the career, right? Because I chose to talk about Fermilab's brand, not really so much my brand, but the lab's brand. Then for the second one, much more personal, right? More relaxed. Got a fun photo that still shows me at work, so it's relevant. Talked about relevant experiences that have kind of factored into my work. Here, a little bit more background, right? Who is this person? What else does she bring? What else is important to her? Well, she wants you to know kind of how this career journey happened. And then what else is there about her that you might connect with? So here are some of the other things that she's passionate about, right? But the photos are still appropriate. They connect to the things that are being talked about in the slide. It all kind of gels together. So the first one is somebody, in my estimation, that's like who I want, that's the vibe I want to get from like a surgeon that's about to perform an operation on me, right? Like that person is very focused on the job at hand, and I want that. The second person is like somebody that I want to hang out with, somebody that's very approachable that I want to work with. The third person freaked out a bit when things weren't going well, right? Like, oh no, I can't believe that this is here. Like struggles to deal with it, right? Doesn't look organized. There's fonts all over the place. There's, terrible spelling. This slide was physically painful for me to put together. There's a photo that is blurry and not relevant. Why does she have a baby photo? What, like, why? Right? This is not a person that you probably want to work with on a group project. They don't look like they've got their act together. So these are all different kinds of brands that you could be putting out about yourself. I would argue that the first two are both very professional. One might be more appropriate in a different scenario. And you can tell because, again, the slides are well organized, they're clear, the person is telling you relevant information, they've shown up in a way that says they respect you and your time. The third one, right, that person is not organized, they've not respected your time. If this were a group project, you don't want to be on their team. And I guess there's like a meta arc to all of this where, the way that I've chosen to present even the first part of this talk tells you something about me and my brand more generally, right? Like, hopefully you've taken away already that I'm fairly relaxed. I like to have fun. I want to make things engaging and approachable, And so there's different ways to do that and different ways that I could have done that professionally. And this is the one that I chose to do. So what your brand is how you represent yourself, right? And I want to be clear that there's a difference between kind of brands for businesses or influencers and what I'm talking about today, where we're talking about professional communication and how you kind of appear to the rest of the world. So a brand from a company, right? They're usually trying to sell you something or make you feel a certain way. I'm not advocating for you to curate or lie about who you are, right? I want you to know that you should be authentic and that the information that you're putting out lines up with who you are in your heart, who you are as a person. You're not trying to sell anything, but you do want to make sure that you come across the way that you want to come across, right? I want to come across as someone who's fun and relaxed and approachable and interested in sharing something that I'm passionate about with you. And so that's the kind of vibe that I'm going to try to put into the entire talk. And again, I think we should also take all of this with a grain of salt as we talk about how we communicate and how our brand comes across. Is you can't make people feel a certain way about you. But you can, again, put out things that align with your beliefs and how you want to present yourself and kind of increase the odds, right? We all make first impressions or impressions on people, or as we interact with people over time, we kind of build up a body of how we interact and who we are as people. And so if you want to, as I imagine you do in professional situations, if you want to come across as being someone who is organized or dependable, that people can trust to get the work done, that's kind of something that you can build up to through your communications as you interact with folks over time. So there are lots of different ways that we communicate about who we are, right? This is what I mean by brand is, who are you? How are you telling people who you are? Because how do people know you, right? It's what you say and what you do and how you act. And so communication is a big part of that, right? It's how you tell people who you are. So there's kind of things that would happen more at work and then things that happen more outside of work. So, all of the content that you're sharing or posting on social media, the photos that you choose to show. If you have a personal website, what information do you put on that website? As you text with people or call with people, right? Like we talked about at the beginning, a lot of folks interact through text or in person or through calls. What you say in those conversations, how you choose to say it, is all part of your brand, right? Is it relaxed? Is it serious? Whatnot. There's also, especially for face-to-face things, right? There's your body language. How are you acting? So, you know, that third person was kind of not that interested, right? She didn't seem like she wanted to be there. And then in some situations, there's also fashion, right? That's a big way of how people express themselves. And then we also have some things that happen a lot more often at work, right? We spend a lot of time emailing, we have a lot of calls, we have a lot of meetings. More and more, we have different messaging platforms, right? So Slack, or if you're in college or university or even in high school, there are different platforms where you have course assignments and you can interact with other students. There's the presentations that we give. There's bios that you write about yourself that appear, like, the short blurbs that kind of people share about you as you're engaging in different things. There's even things like on Zoom, right? When you logged in today, you have the little avatar that shows up, your little box. What photo you choose there, how you choose to represent yourself. These are all things that come across and communicate who we are. So your brand, again, is who you are and what you want to come across. How you want to come across. It's what you want people to remember about you. So this can include all sorts of different things, right? It could be things that you're really passionate about. So for example, I have a friend who is a vegan, who is very interested in animal rights. Her personal email has a signature at the bottom that includes a link to a resource for people to learn more about how to treat animals more kindly, right? That's something that she believes in so passionately that she wants to make sure she's communicating it every time she sends a personal email. It can also be things that you want to kind of show are your expertise. So if you're very serious about science and you want to be known as a trusted science authority, or if you're very passionate about writing and you want to come across as a good writer, right? The things that we choose to include in our communications and how we include them will influence whether or not people trust us in those realms. So, it can show whether or not you're serious about science, or it can, writing a good email can show whether or not I value and care about writing. But I think the biggest thing that comes across, especially in the work environment, can be some of the character traits about us. So, this is who we are and what we hope people will think about us, right? I've already said, I hope that people will kind of find me funny, that they'll see that I'm curious and kind. Because these are things that I value about myself, right? They're things that I'm passionate about and try to cultivate about myself. So the language that we choose to use in communications can reflect these character traits. And so I've bolded a couple here that I think are really important for the professional workplace, because we may want to get across all of these other elements about ourselves. But when we come to the workplace, I think we're trying to accomplish a certain set of things. We want to show other people that we're effective at our jobs, because we want to be effective at our jobs. We want to show other people that we're trustworthy, that you can be counted on to do what you're going to do, what you say you're going to do, and to be responsible, to show that you can be counted on, right? Because team work is like the ultimate group project, right? We're all working together to kind of accomplish one goal, whether that's a class trying to learn something together, whether it's you in your workplace trying to solve a science question, whether it's me in the communications office trying to make sure that we share science in the most effective way possible. And so as we're communicating, we want to make sure that we're showing people our best selves, because we're all trying really hard, right? We're presumably working really hard at these things. We want to be successful. And so we want that to be reflected in how we communicate with other people, that we are trustworthy, we're responsible, and we're effective. So let's take a look at one example that might help some of this brand stuff and communication stuff come across. So imagine you get this message, and I'll read it to you in 1 second. Haven't talked this much since before COVID. Okay. So Imagine that you get this in your email, and imagine that you are a scientist who's well known for working with liquid nitrogen and superconducting materials. So this is like your area of expertise, right? Hello, Dr. Your last name. My name is Romina Harris. I read your research on using liquid nitrogen to levitate magnets. I was hoping to learn more about how this works. I operate a chain of sushi restaurants called The Happy Crab, and am interested in adding levitating plates to get food to customers. If you had 15 minutes for a short phone call, I would really appreciate your time. We'd be happy to compensate you for any additional consulting on the project. Sincerely, Romina Harris, rharris@happycrab.com, www.thehappycrabsushi.com. Okay, so imagine you've received this email. You're an expert in this field. What do you do? Please type it in the chat. There is no right or wrong answer. You can say you would delete it. You can say, all right, we've got a couple different answers. So web stalk them, email her back and call her, disregard it. If I'm amused, I might respond, try to help, email back and say, sorry, but I can't. Maybe it's not a good use of your time. Look more into what she does. The request doesn't really seem applicable to the research. These are great. So most people said that they would at least consider this, right? So a few people said they might just disregard it. That's fine. You're a very busy scientist. You can't answer every email. But a lot of people said, which would be my response, which is, you would Google this person, right? This is a weird email to get. It's kind of out of the blue. You're like, is this legit? I'm intrigued. It sounds kind of cool if we could levitate food to customers like that. That would be an interesting restaurant. I'd want to go there. I would Google this person, right? And they've given me enough information and it feels close enough to legitimate that I would be like, yeah, all right, I've got a name, I've got an email. I can check Yelp reviews. I can see if they have a website. I can see if they have a history of doing interesting food presentation to people. And maybe I choose to help. Maybe I don't. But it's worth an email saying, sorry, I'm too busy, but thanks for reaching out. Maybe it's an email that just says, I really don't think that this would be feasible. But it's a thing that, at least for me, I would spend a second looking at it. What if you got this email? Hey, you, can we talk about using magnets to move crab? FaceTime me ASAP. Later, Romina. What do you do with this one? Put it in the chat. Ignore it, place it in spam, definitely disregard it, delete. You're not responding, right? This looks like spam. You don't know who this person is. They haven't told you what they want. Like, you have no information to go on, right? So this is where communication is really important, because this could be the same person, right? But these are two totally different ways to try to get your request across. And maybe this person is equally serious about wanting to use this technology and have this conversation, but there's no way for you to know as a person receiving that email that they're legit. So I want to make 2 points here, right? One is that the way that you communicate stuff like this, especially to people you don't already have a relationship with, is really like crucial. The language that we use to especially send introductory emails, but also communicate regularly with colleagues or potential colleagues is super important. The second is that if people don't know about you, one of our first responses in the information age is absolutely to Google you. And so this is where it's really important to think about the presence that you have online and through things like social media or like your website, because those are things that you can control that people will then see when they Google you. So if your social media feed is full of you doing illegal activities or, getting drunk or throwing company laptops into a river, like, that's not going to be a good look for you, right? On the other hand, if the content that's out there about you reflects who you are as a person, shows your hobbies, shows your passions, shows you communicating well and respectfully with other people, that's going to be much better for you in the long run, right? And it's also more authentic, hopefully, with who you are. I don't imagine most of you are throwing company laptops into rivers. Okay, let me pause. I've talked a lot. Let me pause and see if there are any questions that folks would like to go into so far, and feel free to put them in the chat. Nothing. I've nailed it. I'm impeccable. How does this apply to managing social media and posts? That's a great question. So I think it applies in a few ways. So one is kind of what I'm mentioning right now, right? Where if somebody wants to know more about you, so say it's like a professional, sorry, let me think about how I want to answer that. So say you're asking a professor for some of your time, or some of their time, or say you are reaching out to someone to try and accomplish something, but maybe it's a new coworker, right? Somebody that, you know, is just an acquaintance, or somebody that you need to work on a project with. They may need to know more information about who you are. And this is especially true in hiring, right? If somebody's going to hire you, they're probably going to be Googling you. They're trying to figure out, is this a good investment of my time? Should I kind of work with this person? Should I give this person some of my valuable time? And so if somebody is going to those sources and seeing what you put out and seeing somebody that is not putting out a positive image, or again, somebody that you want to work on a group project with, right? That can be kind of damaging to some of those opportunities. And so I think as we're putting out social media posts, as we're updating our websites, we want to make sure that, again, we're reflecting things that we care about or that we value. We want to make sure that we're using language that's inclusive and supportive. You don't want to go to somebody's Twitter and see like a string of replies where they're harassing someone, right? Like you may feel very passionately about something, but is that the right way to kind of communicate what you want? And so I think we have to be careful and thoughtful, mostly thoughtful and aware of kind of what we're putting out into the online universe. Let's see. Relevant. So would it also be damaging if we don't put anything out on social media? I think putting out something that's actively negative is probably the worst. I think not having a social media presence is not a huge deal. I think that's one way that people find out about us, right? I personally, because I do social media for my work, I don't spend any time on social media in my personal life because I've just had enough of that sphere by that time. And I'm aware that that's a choice, right? So if somebody is trying to find out information for me, that would be one place that they could find it. If I'm not putting it out there, that's just a source that they don't have. But no, I think that's always a choice, and you can always choose whether or not you want to be on social media, right? That's a huge investment of time. It can be a huge investment in brand. And that's maybe just not of high value or importance to you, and that's totally fine. In communications, how should we balance being concise, not taking too much of the person's time, with being detailed and sounding legitimate? Great question. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but this is definitely something that takes practice. And I think, I'll mention this again later, but good communication in general takes more time than lousy communication, right? It's much easier to send Romina's second email and be like, hey, I want to talk about crab, than it is to put together the right amount of information. So yeah, it's something that you're going to have to practice. It's something where you're going to have to think through, okay, who is this person? What information do they need to know about me to make this request legitimate? What's the right amount of detail to share the issue I'm discussing, but what also might be too much? And I think sometimes we have a sense of what too much is. If you've ever had a conversation with someone and they're trying to tell you a story and they include way too much detail, where someone's like, oh man, I met a celebrity last week. It was Tuesday at 10:30 in the morning. Or was it Wednesday? No, I think it was definitely Tuesday. So it was 10:30 and I was, on my way to go. right? You don't need all that information. You don't get, you're like, it was a day. It was a day, it happened. Who did you meet? I want to know, like, who was the celebrity that you met? Get to the point, right? And so I think it takes a little while to develop that sense of what is appropriate. For more subtle differences in communication, such as tone, how can we evaluate whether we're presenting our message the way we want to? Great question. This is another thing that's really tricky, especially in written materials, right? And especially if you don't know the person. So this is where, it's very hard to interpret tone through text. We've all gotten a text where you're like, ugh, rude. And they're like, oh no, I didn't mean it that way. So I think you just want to be thoughtful, again, about the words that you're using. If you're sending an email that you know already that you're kind of upset about, or you don't agree with someone, sometimes leaving that for a little while, letting yourself cool off. Or, I've written a number of hard emails where I want to make sure that I'm coming across professionally in the way I want. And you can actually reach out to colleagues, right? Coworkers, friends. Hey, someone you trust, hey, I've got this problem. I need to send this email. I feel like I might be being kind of a jerk in this email, but I don't know how to change it. Can you help me? So there's definitely ways that you can ask folks, how can I make this sound more professional? And actually, I know of, there's one woman on TikTok who, if you search for, how do I professionally say, she has this whole series on kind of translating what you want to say into something that might sound more professional. So, you might want to say, stop being a jerk, but, essentially you should say, oh, hey, I think there may have been, some miscommunication on my part. What about we do X, Y, and Z, right? And I think some people might criticize that as saying, oh, you're just lying, you're being too passive aggressive, you're not being direct about it. But I think there's a difference, right? We wouldn't tell our friends, hey, stop being a jerk. Well, maybe you would. But you would only do that if you had a relationship built up with them, right? Where they knew that they could trust you, that you were coming from a good place. And so, yeah, sorry, I'm off on a tangent here, but yeah, there are ways that we can kind of figure out the right way to say things. Amanda says, I've definitely had others read emails to make sure my tone is right. That is good to know. I'm not the only one. Did I miss any of them, fellow Zoom managers of the chat? Oh, sorry. What is the best way to leave off an email? I think that's up to you. I think there are some things that will feel more professional than others, right? I like to end most of my emails with a standard, thanks, Lauren. Sometimes I will say, cheers, Lauren, because again, fairly informal. But you do want to have a sign off, right? Especially if this is the first time you're contacting someone. Thank you, Lauren. Some people who are in more corporate or different environments might end it with a sincerely or best regards, warm wishes, right? So there are lots of different options. I just think it's important to have that kind of sign off that acknowledges thank you, like, thank you for your time. Again, because it's genuine, right? They're spending some of their time on you, and that's nice. And so I think we should acknowledge that. Are we all caught up? Thumbs up. Did I miss anything?
No, I think we got them all.
Okay. Great questions. Thank you so much for asking them. You're all being wonderful. Okay, so the rest of my talk is going to be a little bit more practical, so Professionalism 101. And there are really two things that I could boil this down to. So it's almost anticlimactic because I'm just going to be like, be respectful of people and be clear, because these will get across the most important things that you need to do in a professional environment, right? Being clear and being organized is going to make you look more trustworthy and more legitimate, and have people respond to you better and show that you're more effective in that job, right? And you also, none of us are perfect, right? We're all gonna make mistakes all the time, but you wanna show that you're putting in the effort, that you're at least trying, right? So if you mess up something in an email, you forget to do a sign off, you don't include the right link, we've all been there, we'll all be there again. It's a problem if you're doing it on a regular basis, right? If you're always sending emails with the wrong information that aren't clear, that people can't figure out what you're trying to say, that's a problem, right? Because we want to know what you have to say. We want to be able to interact with you and support you the best way we can. So here are some situations that may have happened to you in your life already. And if you could just put in the chat, maybe the number and how you felt when one of these scenarios happened. So perhaps someone has called you by the wrong name. Maybe someone has assumed that you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe somebody has asked you for help doing something, but then you find out they didn't even try to do it themselves. They're just like making you do it. Or maybe somebody is ignoring you while you're trying to tell them something that is really important to you. So a number and how it made you feel. Someone assumed that you did not know what you were talking about and you were seriously irritated. Because that's rude. Number one, someone calls you by the wrong name. Might have been an accident. So you might be irritated, but you understand it happens. For the second one, you might be determined to prove yourself. Number four, you feel upset, you're disrespected, you're trying to share important information with you. They're on their phone, how dare they? Number one, I would throw a joke for your hard name. Humor, often one of the best responses. Upset, mad, determined to prove folks wrong, irritated, annoyed, right. So that's similar to how I feel for most of these, right? Most of these, all of these, to me, are kind of symbols of disrespect, right? They're a little rude, they're not considerate. You would hope people would do a little bit better. And these are all things that can happen really easily in the workplace. So someone calls you by the wrong name. I have been called Laura or Leah more times than you would believe possible, right? Once is fine, it's a fluke. Regularly being called Leah by someone who knows me, like, that's not my name, right? That doesn't feel good. It doesn't acknowledge, like, I'm a person, my name is Lauren, that's who I am. And taking the time to recognize that about someone is like a basic courtesy, right? You want to try and get someone's name right. Maybe someone doesn't assume what you're talking about. So this can be talking over someone in a meeting, or it can be sending an email to a professor that, real example, starts, yo, prof. Hello, I've spent many years getting a PhD. My name is Dr. Raff, right? Like, that's not an appropriate response or treatment of someone who has spent a lot of time developing expertise and should be treated as such. Maybe somebody asks you for help that hasn't tried it themselves. So you get a lot of email in the business world often, or, okay, actually different examples. So say you're in a college class, you can't find the assignment for the night. And so you email your professor, hey, what was the reading? What's the reading? I can't find it. Did you try searching through the courseworks? Did you email a colleague? Or did you, one of like 200 students that this person is trying to help and teach, did you just go straight to that person, right? That's not respectful of their time or energy. And then finally, someone's ignoring you while you try to tell them something important. This happens all the time in meetings, right? Somebody is trying to communicate with you, somebody's trying to brainstorm, someone's trying to figure out a problem, and you're over there on your laptop answering different emails, playing Candy Crush, doing whatever people do, right? So that's rude, and it's not a good use of people's time. So all of this essentially comes down to respect, right? You've heard of the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. There's also the extended version of the rule, which I don't know if it has a new name, but like treat others as they want to be treated. And so we want to be respectful of other people, both in life and also in the workplace. And so you want to be respectful. I've divided this into three big things. The first one is people's time and energy. People have a limited amount of time, right? They have a limited amount of things that you can get done in a day. And so you can imagine it like, if your friend comes up to you and asks you for $20, and you're like, yeah, sure, I know you, you're good for it. You're probably buying something cool. Let me know what it is. You give them $20. If a stranger comes up to you and asks you for $20, you might be a generous person. You're like, yeah, I'm inclined to help you, but why? Maybe a little more information would be helpful. If somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, can I have $20? You give them $20. They go away and they lose it and they come back to you 10 minutes later and they're like, hey, can I have another $20? You're like, no, I just invested some money in you. I think this is the same thing with time, right? Time is a valuable resource. People's energy and what they work on is a valuable resource. And so you don't want to squander it. You want to make sure that you're showing people that you're a good investment in time, and you want them to respect your time as well and your energy. The next one is expertise and experience, right? So we want to look at people and say, oh yeah, you may know more about this than I do, right? You may know more about this subject than I do. I want to be respectful of all the time that you've spent on this project or learning this thing. And the third one is, where's my clicker? Just people's feelings and humanity, right? I think there's sometimes people forget in the workplace that like people are still human. They're more than just their jobs. They're more than just the interactions that you're having. You want to be respectful of who people are and make them feel valued and be supportive and be inclusive. And I think that's really important. So we want to make sure that every time we communicate with people, we're being respectful of their time, being respectful of their expertise, and we're being respectful of their humanity. And you may say, Lauren, like, why? What's the point? Why should I bother? What's in it for me? Well, one, that's being a good human being, I think. We should all be respectful of one another. But within the workplace, right, it helps build trust. It may mean you get to work more independently, right? Or not have somebody kind of trying to micromanage or guide you or tell you what to do. There's more respect for what you're bringing to the table. It can make working together more fun, certainly clearer and faster, right? If you don't have to spend a lot of time going back and forth trying to figure stuff out. Projects can be more successful, and it can open up more opportunities for you. And sometimes, if you're very trustworthy, they give you a bullhorn at Fermilab's 50th anniversary, and you get to shout at people. Okay, so how am I doing on time? Okay, good. So the last one is, I just want to go into some best practices and things that I've found that are helpful and that I try to do when I'm communicating. And I want to be clear that what's professional is also always changing, right? There's stuff that happened 50 years ago that would never happen now. There's stuff that's happening now that probably won't happen in 50 years, right? It's always changing. And it depends on the workplace and the individual. So a startup is going to have a different professional culture than a corporation and a lab and whatever else you can think of, right? They're all going to be a little bit different. And so you kind of need to get to know that environment. And it's also going to depend on the individual, right? I'm pretty laid back. I don't care if somebody's like, hey, Lauren, I don't need like Ms. Byron all the time, right? That's not for me. But there's no way to necessarily know that about people. And so I think we want to err on the side of respect. So let's talk about one of the biggest ones, emails. Please, if you take nothing else away from my talk, use people's correct name, titles, and pronouns. It takes like not even 2 seconds. Most people have their name in their email address or their email signature. Just double check that you've typed the right thing. If you're emailing a professor, do not start the email with yo prof. Doctor, last name, right? Be respectful. When you send your emails, take a second to proofread your text, right? Go back to Romina. Romina didn't care. We care. We're bothering to write the email because we care about what's in it. And it shows that again, you're effective, you're organized, you're responsible. You can write an email in a way that is understandable. That bodes well for you doing other projects as well. Be concise, but with the appropriate level of context and info. Not too little, not too much. Find the sweet spot. If you don't know if you've got way too much information in it, you can, again, ask somebody to read it. Be like, would you be really confused if I sent you this email? What in here do you feel like you didn't need to know? If you're writing with a request, be really clear about what you're asking for, right? If you've just got a mile-long email with a ton of different random stuff going on in it, and buried somewhere in there is the actual thing you're trying to get accomplished, that's much harder for the person reading the email to try to figure out, right? Help them help you. And again, be respectful of that time and energy, because it may be very easy for them to answer that question. But if they can't find it, they can't help you. Try to answer the question yourself first. Can you Google it? Can you search your email? Has this been presented somewhere that you can quickly find? If you're about to ask a large group of people a question, or a professor that deals with a ton of different students who may have really limited time, can you form networks with other people that are your peers that you can go to and try and get that information instead? I think it feels very unprofessional to me when somebody's like, hey, what's this info? And I'm like, I literally have an email thread with you where I sent you this exact information. Allow me to search for it and forward you the email, right? Not a good use of my time. Doesn't look great for that person that I'm trying to work with. And provide ample turnaround time. Do not send people an email, most scenarios, and expect an immediate response, right? Those people have lives. They have a lot of other stuff they're trying to accomplish. And so if you have a sudden emergency that shouldn't have been an emergency because you waited till the last minute to email them, that's your problem. Don't make it somebody else's problem, right? We want to work with people that we trust and respect and are going to help make it easier for us to accomplish our goals. We don't want to work with somebody who's always dragging us down or making life more complicated than it needs to be. And if there are large group emails that are going around, really think about whether or not you need to reply all. Because if you're replying all, but it doesn't need to be seen by all, you're just, again, cluttering up people's inboxes, right? You're not being respectful of people's time. Somebody then has to go through the energy of looking at it. Does this apply to me? No, it doesn't. Why did you send this recipe for biscuits to the entire listserv? I don't know. And include a greeting and a sign off. So, hey, let's talk about crabs versus, hello, Lauren, my name is Romina. Thank you for your time, right? One of those feels much more respectful, like somebody has taken the time to say, hello, you're a human being, I see you. It's not just somebody asking for something. A lot of communication, more and more, has been happening on platforms like Slack or in things like Courseworks. And so a lot of the same rules still apply here, right? You want to show that you're being clear. You want to show that you're an effective communicator, but it's a bit more relaxed, right? People use GIFs. It's a fun time. Punctuation, capitalization, not as important, but I think it's still important to be clear about things that we're asking for, what we expect from people, right? I think the timing is also a little bit different when we're using things like Slack. So if you are working with a team that is expected to be available through one of these platforms, you want to make sure that you are around and you're setting clear expectations about when you will be available and be there to respond. On the other hand, the flip side, respect if other people have some of those boundaries, right? That they're like, I need an hour so that I can just write something and do some solid work without having to respond on call to things. So again, just be respectful of how other people are working. Things like Slack have different channels that you can divide the content into. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right information in the right channel. So, there's a general channel. Does everyone in general need to see it? Or is this about a specific subtopic, right? Like neutrino physics. Just want to reach the people that are working on neutrino physics right now. And again, use the search function. Do you need to ask somebody something that they've already said in Slack, or you can just type it and find it yourself and it'll be much faster. Meetings. Spend a lot of time in meetings as well, especially in academia, right? If you're hosting a meeting, have an agenda. There's no better way to be respectful of people's time in a meeting than to come prepared with an agenda. Similarly, if you're having the meeting and you have the agenda, set the expectations for what you want people to come with, right? Should they have already read something? Should they be bringing ideas? Tell them what they need to do to make the meeting more effective, so you're all not just wasting each other's time sitting around chatting about whatever. If you're attending the meeting, come prepared, pay attention, don't be sending a bunch of other emails. I know that's really difficult, especially on Zoom, where we've all got Zoom fatigue and we're sick of staring at the screen. So I totally respect if you just need to gaze off into the distance for a while because your neck hurts. But if you're working on something as a team, you should be paying attention and prepared to participate. If you're doing a Zoom online and you're not talking, you should be muted or muting noisy backgrounds. By the way, there are birds outside, they're very loud, and I wonder if you've been listening to them this whole time, but I can't control that. In meetings, also make sure that you're respecting other people and their contributions, right? So share the air, make sure that you're not the only person talking. If you've been talking too much, try and encourage other folks to get involved. Try not to dominate the conversation too much. Again, I'm not saying don't have an opinion and don't participate, but just make sure that people feel like it's a welcoming environment where everybody can contribute together. Finally, be on time. Not finally. Give constructive feedback. So this is kind of related to, even if you're disagreeing with someone in a professional environment, in a meeting, in an email, this is really for everything. You want to give constructive feedback. You can't just be like, that's a dumb idea, Jen. I hate it. You have to say, oh, okay, this is an interesting idea. I'm worried that it might not work because of X, Y, and Z, right? That's a much more effective way of interacting with someone. You're putting something out there that's more useful. You've actually narrowed down what the problem is. You're still being respectful of that person as a human, right? They may have had a bad idea. They're not a bad person, right? They were brave. They put something out there. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. Presentations. So come prepared, practice, proofread, so make sure that your slides and things look good. Make your content accessible and as engaging as possible. So, you don't want to have to try and decipher someone's presentation or slides, right? That the messy Lauren looked unprepared and unprofessional. You had no idea what she was trying to tell you. Stuff was all, matted on top of, content on top of content. You can't actually read what's going on. That's no fun. But I will say presentations are also a really good place to let some of your brand and some of those other characteristics about you come across, right? Like, I wanted to put in GIFs. I can still give a professional talk and include silly GIFs from the office. Like there are ways to do things professionally and still let other aspects of you shine through. So this has all been kind of work that you do while you're hired somewhere. I just wanted a quick note about getting hired or applying for jobs. So as you make biographies about yourself, or as you update your resume or your website, again, same principles, right? Proofread. Include specific accomplishments that tell people what you did. I can say, oh, I run social media, or I can say, I've added 900,000 new followers to Fermilab, and one of those communicates something different than the other. You want to make sure that things are updated. You want to make sure that your online presence is what you would prefer that people hiring you see. And you just generally want to be aware of what information is available publicly about you, right? So there are certain settings that you can change on social media platforms that control how much is publicly accessible to people that say are not friends with you. And so just be aware that that's a thing that you can go in and set. But generally, you should be standing by all of this kind of content that you're putting out about yourself. So like I said at the beginning, all of this kind of communication takes a little bit more work. Sometimes it takes a lot more work, right? If you're emailing with somebody about a really complicated topic, it takes more effort to make a really clear, concise email, to figure out what you actually are asking, what you do want to accomplish, like where is the problem, right? It takes an extra step to do that. But on the other hand, it reflects really well on you when you do that, because you're like, here's a person who's got it together, who's put in the effort, who's shown that they're trying, who's trying to help make this process work better. And it's also something that you can practice, right? I've sent many a terrible email. I, struggle to look back at stuff that I put out in my earliest years because I'm like, wow, I know so much more now. Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness those things are embarrassing because it means I have learned and I have grown. So it's possible. So if it seems overwhelming, or if you're like, throw my hands up, this is impossible, it's not. You can do it. Do not fear. So now I think I'm fairly close to time. I have talked quite a lot, but I welcome all of your questions. So whether it's something that I touched on, something I should have touched on, if you have specific scenarios that you've encountered or that you can imagine coming across, I'm happy to talk about those. I can also talk more about me. I'm not that interesting, but I can tell you about kind of how I came here, what it's like to be a science writer. All three of us can tell you what it's like to work at Fermilab. I can't actually answer one of these questions, which is why I look like such a tiny old man in my baby photo. When you think about it, a lot of people do. Why do we all look like tiny old men in our baby photos? So I'm gonna turn it over to you now, and I hope that you have some questions in the chat that continue to build on your other fabulous questions. And I'll just say thank you so much again for spending part of your Saturday with me. And if you have questions that you think of later or that you're not comfortable asking here, please feel free to email me, lbyron@fnal.gov.
That was great, Lauren. Thank you. Other attendees can't unmute, so I'll just clap.
Okay, we got a question. How does the time it takes you to respond to message reflect on you? How do you handle response time if you are busy, not ready to respond to the situation? What a great question. So I think the time that it takes you to respond to messages can reflect on you if you're regularly not responding to someone, right? If people have sent you an email, it's been, let's say, a reasonable business amount of time. Let's say you gave them 3 days, right? Like that's a decent amount of time. They follow up with you, you still don't respond. It doesn't look great, right? It reflects on you in the way that, oh, this person, I don't know. Have you gotten my email? Have you gotten it and you're thinking about it? Have you gotten it and you don't know? Have you gotten it and you hate me and you never plan to respond, right? It's not transparent. It's not clear. So I think, if you're in a situation where you're just not going to be able to get to it, right? Life is busy. You've got other stuff you've got to deal with. That's a low priority. I think it's perfectly professional to write somebody back and be like, hey, I received your email. I'm really sorry I can't get to this right now. Here's when I think I might be able to weigh in, right? That shows more respect, right? You've seen the email, you've acknowledged it. You take 2 seconds to say, hey, I'm sorry, I hear you, but I can't right now. I have other priorities. And then the person at least knows, right? I think leaving people hanging out there is one of the least professional things that you can do because it's really hard to interpret that. I also worry, I don't want people to feel like they have to respond to everything immediately, because you shouldn't be doing that either, right? Like you should respond to things when it makes sense. You should maybe carve out some time during the day to send, this is my email block, right? And then for the next hour, I'm not going to do any email because I got to actually work on this thing and pay attention to it. Let's see. Could you recommend any books or references for resume writing and interviews? Ooh, that's a great question. Specifically for that topic, nothing comes to mind. Amanda or Jen, if you have resources, please feel free to butt in. Partially, I can't think of any of these because I have not applied to a job or written a resume in quite some time. They are out there. I would be happy to try to find that answer and get back to folks.
I'm not sure about resumes because I also haven't written one in more than 10 years. But for interviews, at least when we're interviewing people at Fermilab, a helpful thing you can do is search for behavioral interviewing questions. And that will give you a bunch of the types of questions that people often ask in interviews. And these are not specific to Fermilab. It's a technique for interviewing that lots of places use. So that could be helpful. I don't know a specific book, but I think you will find a lot of information if you just Google that.
Yeah. I'm like, I know how I would solve this question. I would Google, and then I would look for maybe a top 10 list from a reputable place, or I would maybe go to Goodreads and see what has worked well for other folks. And I'm sorry, I don't have a specific recommendation, and I feel like a bad reader that I don't have this book top of mind. What's your favorite thing about working at Fermilab? That's tough. There are a lot of things to love. I think the variety of weird experiences and things that I've gotten to work on has been really satisfying for me because, like I said, a Jill of all trades, like I like to do a lot of different little things. I like to have lots of different experiences. And so being a science nerd and getting to go around and see accelerators in person or go a mile underground or, work on all sorts of different things that are related to different kinds of science at the lab, it's been really, really fun and really exciting. And my career path was that I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I really loved science and writing. And so I was, an undecided major in college. I was like, oh, I like science. Oh, I like writing. Oh, I'm too lazy for research. Oh, I don't want to write a book. Okay, I'll combine the two into this. And so one of the really unique things about being a science writer at a national lab is getting to almost feel like you're part of the collaboration. Perhaps the other scientists will be like, you're not one of us. But so, for example, getting to share the muon G-2 announcement last year when they were like, we have these really exciting new results that people have been waiting 20 years for. I was one of the first 200 or 300 people to know about that. And it was really cool to know this little science secret and be aware of this cool science that was happening and be a part of sharing that with the world. So I think that's something that I really enjoyed. And then Amanda or Jen, I don't know if you want to chime in with your favorite thing about working at Firmware.
Oh, I just wanted to add something to what you said about maybe the scientists don't think you're part of collaboration. I think exactly the opposite is true. I think we as scientists are very thankful that you and the other people in the communications office are there to help us see how to communicate our science without people's eyes glazing over, So I'm very glad that you're around and helping us with that.
I think the thing for me is just people getting to see what big science looks like. The look of someone walking in the atrium of Wilson Hall for the first time, or even doing virtual events, like being able to show parts of the experiment that even if they were there, there's no way they could see those parts of the experiment, So just being able to connect people with big science. I also love all things science. So it's really cool that I get to kind of experience and learn about all these different things, like I said, from particle astrophysics to muon G-2 to neutrinos, things I didn't know about till I worked at the lab and I was teaching science before I came here. It's just always a really cool opportunity to learn and share. And that's my favorite part.
Awesome. What is an appropriate tone and length for a cover letter? Again, I think this can kind of depend on the job. I would say under a page, a few paragraphs to a page. Again, this is being respectful of people's time and showing that you have the clarity to distill for them the most important things that they need to know about you. And then I would say for tone, again, I think it's professional and respectful and sharing specific accomplishments. But I've written many a cover letter that had some of my personality in it, right? Like I'll put in a fun anecdote that is relevant and still shows something important about myself. That's also my brand. And frankly, if they don't want to hire me knowing that I'm a fun person that's occasionally going to slip in a joke, that's probably not a place I want to work anyway, right? So how do you talk about your accomplishments for professional reasons without seeming like too much? Yeah, I think it depends on the context, right? Like if somebody has asked you to detail things that you have done, that's not bragging, right? You're sharing, these are the things that I have accomplished that I worked really hard on that I cared about. I think maybe if you're injecting it into places where it doesn't necessarily belong, like you're having a conversation with someone and you're talking about yeah, I'm trying to think of an example and failing. You're just kind of having a chat about something, and then you're like, did I tell you I climbed, you're talking about hiking, and you're like, did I tell you I climbed Mount Everest? Allow me to detail everything about that, right? Like that has a different vibe to it than, oh, Lauren, you're giving a talk today about Mount Everest, like climbing Mount Everest. Please tell us more, right? So I think context and just kind of being aware and reading the room. If this is happening in a meeting and people are just like, again with the Mount Everest, like, you just want to be aware and be able to kind of respond to that and be like, oh yeah, maybe I am telling the Mount Everest story again.
Can I add something to that? I think I've noticed that in myself and other women, we feel very uncomfortable often talking ourselves up. And so part of this is you may feel like it's too much. And certainly Lauren's example there was too much, but often it's not too much. And so when I'm writing a letter or something applying for an award or something, I will write it in a very understated way. And then I hand it to a friend and I say, could you highlight what things I should amplify? And having someone else go in and say, hey, why didn't you talk more about that other award you got for doing work that's really related to this thing you're trying to get? And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I should add that in. So it's very helpful to have someone else look at it and tell you how to talk more about yourself, because women often find that difficult.
Well said, Jen. Yeah, I know that's often the case where I'm like, oh, I'm not that great. And they're like, you're writing a cover letter. Like your job right now is literally to tell people all of the reasons you are great. It's not bragging. Like just tell people why you are great.
Right.
What is the favorite part of your job, and what should you do when you want to get a big career job? Like, should you have previous experience with smaller jobs? Yeah, so I think, if by like big career job, you mean like, I want to run a national lab, right? That's a totally achievable career goal, but you can't just walk in the first day and be like, I'm ready. I'm here. I've managed a bake sale, and so I'm definitely ready for millions of dollars of high-tech science projects, right? There's going to need to be some intermediate steps where you show that you have the qualifications, that you have the experience to do those things. And you may have all that already inside you. You probably do. But in some cases where people are entrusting you with a lot of responsibility, you just have to show along the way that you've taken those steps to kind of show that you can do it. What types of jobs are at Fermilab? So there's all sorts of jobs at Fermilab. It takes a whole village to make a physics lab, or really any institution run. So, at Fermilab, we have the science side. So you have the scientists and you have engineers that are building things. You have technicians that keep things running. You have people working on like geology related things. So like the alignment of our beamline has to be done in a specific way. So you have people that are experts in like soil and geology. You also have people on the other side that keep things running, right? Like you have communicators like me that are explaining what we're doing. You have people in finance that are making sure everyone gets paid. There are people in a different kind of communication that make sure you have cell phones that work. There are people in computing that make sure the scientific computing happens, or that all of the systems that the lab runs are working properly. We have a daycare center at Fermilab, right? There are teachers on site. Fermilab has a huge campus. We have a roads and grounds team that makes sure we're like pulling out invasive species, keeping the site open, plowing the roads when there's snow.
There's a site ecologist also.
A site ecologist. So there are all sorts of things that you can do in the science realm that are either like science itself, other STEM careers, right? There are theorists that are just kind of working on a blackboard or on computers and thinking, not at all about the experimental side, well, a little bit about the experimental side, but thinking about some of the big theories and how everything fits together. So yeah, there's tons of different jobs to make Fermilab run.
We have only a couple minutes left, so maybe we can pick one last question.
I haven't even read all of them, so if
there's
you've seen one and you want to call that.
Good questions in here.
And if I didn't get to one of yours, again, please feel free to email me. I will answer everyone.
There is one that's asking, how did you get into publicity / journalism, that I think is a good one to kind of wrap up with.
Sure. Yeah, so like I said, I had some experience running a technology-focused magazine and some experience doing some freelance science writing. So freelance writing was what I was doing at the time when I got the Fermilab job. And I'll be honest, like if you're considering freelance science writing, it's very difficult. It requires a lot of hustle and like cold calling people and contacting folks. And I was honestly looking for something that was like a little bit more stable, where I would get to work with some of the same folks every day and be part of sort of a larger mission. And I had a friend from grad school who was then working at Brookhaven National Lab and said, "Hey, how did you have you checked out the National Lab system?" And I had not even really been aware of the National Lab system, I'm sorry to say, and I had certainly not heard of Fermilab. And I did some research, and I should say I have no physics background. I've never taken a physics class in my life. And for some reason, they hired me. So I applied both because I wanted to write about science, but also because it was a topic that I really knew nothing about and was excited to learn about. And they were willing to teach me. They basically said, "You're a strong enough writer and communicator that we can teach you the science." And so I think that worked out hopefully well for everyone.
I'm glad you're at Fermilab.
Me too.
Same.
Yeah.
I love being able to work with Lauren on projects. It's great.
Yeah, I love it when they give her a bullhorn and let her shout at us to do things that line up in the shape of a 50. All right, so before we close for today, I want to invite you all to check out the SAGE website for more about SAGE and its programs. And you can also follow us on the social media links that you'll find on that web page in the upper right corner. And let me just post the link to that in the chat. And there will also be a link to the recording of this session posted on Instagram when it's available on our YouTube channel. So that will be available if you want to share it with someone who couldn't attend today, or if you liked hearing Lauren's advice so much that you want to hear it again, go listen to that. But you'll have to follow the Instagram channel to get it. And if you're interested to learn more about Fermilab and our educational and internship programs, you can check out these links that I'll post in here. And yeah, so check those out. We're really glad that you were able to attend today. We hope you enjoyed it. And thank you all for the really great questions and the comments and all the really active participation. And have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. So thanks.